Us today. We're here today to talk about an issue that's near and dear to our hearts in downtown Cleveland, uh, workers returning to their downtown offices. And this is something that we've been talking about, it feels like off and on for a lot of time over many months, where employers would prepare to bring workers back into the office. There would be another escalation in COVID-19 cases, another tightening of public health restrictions, and we seem to go through that cycle several times over the last several months. But now, coming out of the NFL draft that was so successful here in downtown Cleveland, with the mass vaccination program being so successful and the weather turning nice, we're seeing more and more people returning downtown. We obviously thrive on that vibrancy of restaurant shops, people living, working, and playing in downtown. And that's what we're beginning to see more and more of every day. And that vibrancy is so important to attracting workers back into downtown. But it's also important for the workers who come back to feel safe in their office environments. And we've got the perfect pair of panelists to talk to us today about those issues. We're joined by Megan Spinos, Principal and Strategy Director at Vocon, and John Verdile, the President and Founder of Expense Solutions. Megan, John, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We're looking forward to the conversation today, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of interest from our audience because, again, it's something that we're hearing more and more from both workers and employers over the next couple of months. We're expecting to see more and more people coming back into their offices downtown and spending time in the central business district. We're very excited about that, very excited to welcome them. Megan, you're a veteran of the Downtown Now webinar series. We had you on last year, so I'd like to begin with you. And I know Vocon does a ton of office design in downtown, and I know has spent a lot of time thinking about and working on it and researching the next wave of office culture. And I know you've done some survey work. Could you describe some of the research and surveying you've done and what you expect to see on the horizon?
Yeah, so thanks for having us. And this has been such an interesting topic. And I would say about last March, end of March, after we went into COVID, our team, our design leaders, our owners, we realized that we were at the forefront of something pretty massive, kind of like post 9/11, how it shaped how we were thinking about security and surveillance and all those kinds of things. And we, things have been moving so quickly that we just would get together every single week. Well, that time we were doing it most daily. And what are we learning? What are we hearing from our clients? Because we stay very close. We have our office in New York as well. And that was a completely different experience. And we've just kept our ear to the train track, so to speak, for this. And we've done a series of surveys, all throughout COVID. Kind of every couple of months, we would hit it again. And we would see this evolution of people's thinkings kind of change, both from the employee side and the leadership side. Employees thinking changes. We've kind of grown through this, and kind of to your point, we've been here, we've been back, we've been forward, and we've been back. But the interesting thing about now is with the vaccine kind of really taking off and being readily available, we reached out to leaders in February. We hit about 100 leaders all across the country, but about 40, maybe 40 to 50% of them in this area. But those people make decisions for nearly 1 million employees. So we felt like we had a pretty good sample here to try to gauge what people were thinking and feeling. And I'll tell you, Jonathan has some slides up, but the overall theme here was that we were missing our connection to culture. It was becoming really detrimental. We were realizing that we're not totally ready to work in a hybrid fashion. No one has done this. I mean, organizations, yes, there's been many organizations that have had remote workforces. But on this level, we have not had, groups that were going to be kind of in multiple locations. So we weren't really great at knowing what to do there. And there was still a ton of uncertainty around the future. And I think there still is. And so you've got all of us kind of saying, well, what are you doing? What is your organization doing? Can we figure this out together? And so what we dove into, and I'll go through a couple of our responses, was to really try to find some path forward. But I think we're still in a period of experimentation and study and see how this is going to go, because we're not quite to that fully vaccinated piece yet. We're only just starting to bring the workforce back in a large scale. And I don't think we're ever going to be a culture work culture that is going to be in the office absolutely 5 days a week. Yes, there will be some, there's going to be plenty that's just natural to them and that's what works for them. But I think we're seeing kind of a permanence of remote work and hybrid work, I should say, because we believe in the workplace. And I'm going to talk about why we still think that that's important. But one of the first questions that we asked was, what are your top challenges that you're facing? So like I mentioned, that connection to culture. We thought that it was going to actually be more about the workflow, technology, all these kind of things that were maybe clunky in the beginning, but people were really working well. And so that wasn't the problem as much as it was we've lost that connection to our culture, and the physical work environment is the place for that to happen. For sure, the second and third responses, the top responses there was mentorship and development has really taken a hit. We've onboarded employees. We've hired 30 employees just in the last 3 months, which is amazing, both in our Cleveland and our New York offices. But onboarding those teams when you're remote, and we have been back, we've been kind of come and go as you need to, because we need our access to our libraries to design great things. But that's been a tough experience. And so our new employees are really struggling to get that connection to culture. If you want to go to the next slide, I can just kind of quickly go through some of these. So we also asked, what was the most important thing that you're thinking of as a leader when you're thinking about a hybrid work strategy? So most leaders were saying in our survey, we're going to offer some degree of flexibility. We're not quite sure exactly what that is yet. It might be most of the week in the office with a couple of weeks or a couple of days a week working remotely. That seemed to be very universal because people were really appreciating the flexible nature of their work. They appreciated the work-life balance, but they also missed being in the office. So again, the biggest factor in developing that hybrid work strategy was to have that connection to culture, to building those coworker relationships, leveraging technology to make kind of all of this happen. So that's been really kind of telling to see what the worries are. It's less about the physical space supporting them in some of these things, but as much about the culture getting together. You can see kind of a little bit further down is that management training and workforce training. And what I mentioned kind of at the beginning was that we're kind of concerned about how we're all going to, figure this out and be able to manage remote teams and teams that are in person, and also to be an employee that is maybe working with others that might be in both locations. So certainly lots to talk about throughout all of that, but those were some of the highlights that we started to see from the feedback that we were getting.
Well, it's consistent with some of the things that we're experiencing at Downtown Cleveland Alliance. We too believe in place-based work culture and the opportunity for team building and innovation.
Yeah.
We've had our team on a rotational basis coming in the office essentially every other day for most of the last year, and I anticipate that we'll all be in more frequently in the very near future. I'm curious, Megan, as you're talking with office users that are in the market right now,
Yeah.
making decisions about their future office place needs. They're assessing their current lease that may be expiring in the near future. How do you see them assessing how much space they're going to need?
Yeah. Well, one, I think it's kind of a three-parter, and this is what I hope makes it a little bit simpler for people to think about. And one, it's really establishing what your purpose is. Why do we need a workplace if we have done really well working remotely? And it's about creating that mission and vision for what we're doing. Is it a place of connection, a place of collaboration? We know we can do certain things at home, and that's fine. And a lot of people still want to do that. So what's the new purpose of our work environment? For some, it may not change. For some, we may still need as much heads down space and private offices and workstations as we had before, but one, it's that exploration and what do we need this for? And, is it about, bringing people together? The second is about thinking about that strategy. How are we going to use space? One of the very interesting questions we've asked employee surveys and all of our client engagements was, if you had more flexibility, would you be willing, and you had a proper space to go to when you came into the office, maybe you're coming in for a meeting or for training or to work on a team project or even to just connect with people, do you really need an assigned space? We don't want to take space away, but it's an exploration that we want to ask people because it gives you a sense of how much real estate that you really need. I think early on, we were very cautious to our clients and to others to really avoid making any rush decisions because the pendulum tends to swing and we don't want to cut our spaces back too far, not get people back in that need to be together, and then find that we're missing that and we don't have the right spaces that we want, or we don't have enough spaces. But I think just a deeper dive into really how do we want to use our spaces? Who's going to be here a lot that really needs dedicated space? Who may drop in less frequently but still need a place to go is just more of a thoughtful strategy around how you might use your work areas. And I think you'll find that maybe certain places that you had before you don't need anymore, and certain places that you didn't have before you may need. So I don't think it's a dramatic decrease in the amount of space that you need, but it's about setting that intention about what you need. And then that third piece is about creating the experience that you want. You know, so many organizations, the fight for talent is strong right now, and it has been. People want to work for an organization that has a strong mission and values and has a strong identity. What do you want your workplace to look and feel like as people come to your environment? Do you want to be a gathering place for people and cultures and workflow and things like that? So it's about setting that experience that you want to have. So I think once you kind of figure those things out and think deeply with your team through those things, you start to have a vision of what you're going to need, well into the future.
Again, I think it draws on our experience at the Alliance, and as we talk to a lot of employers, what we experienced is, a lot of people got used to working from home. And if you ask the question, of the employee, what's your preference?
Yeah.
Once you're kind of used to it, the answer would often be, well, I'd prefer to work from home more often.
More often.
We also found is when people got together, they realized how much they missed the connection.
I know.
Of colleagues. And I'm wondering if your surveying is picking up that phenomena.
It's that, and observations are picking that up. So when we ask the question, we would say, you want to come in 5 days a week? We kind of need to know that because we have to have space for those kinds of people. Do you want to work mostly at home, meaning you're, mostly 3+ days a week at home? Do you want to be in the office most of the time? Or you just want to be fully work from home? Biggest numbers are, I want to be in the office most of the week, at home a couple of days a week. The second biggest was kind of the flip of that. So split the difference, half and half. We really saw small numbers that said, I really only want to work from home. And I think we hear about a lot of this, this, are we nervous about asking our people to come back? Those numbers were less than 10% across the board. And it was, maybe specialized roles that really didn't have a lot of interaction with others or were more independent in nature. And it's definitely on a one-off basis. But we only knew we were all working from home. So we only knew that environment. And it was something really novel for a lot of us. And so not putting on shoes and wearing elastic waist was kind of fun for a while. And it was really fun. So we know that we're competing with that. I know. We know that that's what we're competing with. John's really still in flip-flops, I think. I don't know.
You every now and then, you have to you try your real clothes on to make sure they still fit. Right?
Yeah. But what we realized is that when we did get together, one, it was a completely different experience. And another big observation that we've noted is that when we're working remotely, a lot of us, we're knowledge workers. We are on every half hour. That day is very different from a day in the office. And so you almost have to be prepared to have a little social, you're not kind of as regimented as you are at home because you're seeing people and that interaction is great, but it's different. It's very different.
Well, we found in our practice, which is, both commercial and industrial, you've got those who had the choice not to be in, and you had those who had no choice. They had to go in, right? The manufacturing plants, food processing, etc. So one of the things that, we've been working on with clients is to find a way to have even the ones who need to be there go in a way in which they're not going to have any adverse effects. I mean, if one person would be infected with something, they shut the whole line down. Right. You'd have massive loss of productivity. You have massive loss of production. So there's two kinds of ways to look at this. There's the person who has the flexibility of saying I can work remotely, yet there's the line worker and the person that's in the factory that's affected in the same way as the office worker, but it has no choice because we still have to make things and sell things and create things. So, and number one, Megan's a tough act to follow. I'm going to try to do as well as she did it. So it's a little oversight.
Can you tell us a little bit about Expense Solutions and your products and services? Because as you said, there's a dimension of innovation, culture, collaboration, all those sorts of things for people who may have a choice. And regardless of whether they have a choice, there's a health dimension to this. We want people to be and feel safe coming into their building and work environments, and that's really what you focus on.
Yeah, we were drawn into the business, actually. We've been in the consulting industry and business for many years, and working with folks and managing their energy portfolios and looking at HVAC issues and energy issues and lighting issues. So what happened was we had a lot of clients actually start asking us, hey, listen, I'm hearing about this particular technology or this particular technology, and it's supposed to help with airborne issues. It's supposed to help with issues on my desks. So as any consulting firm would do, like Megan, what do? You put your thinking cap on, you dig in, you roll up your sleeves and say, okay, what's out there? Why is it out there? And what's the purpose, right? So you find out that, with any airborne pathogen or allergen or any kind of an indoor air quality issue, there's several ways to improve that environment, to clean that environment, to make that environment more palatable, okay? Because there's no silver bullet. I mean, no one's going to say, listen, if we do this, you're going to go into this building and not catch a cold or not get SARS or not be affected by COVID, right? But there's layers of things you could put into place. It's like a risk manager. And that's really what I've done for my clients over the year with energy is I'm a risk manager. So you sit back and say, okay, if my environment for infection and getting ill is this big, our job is to just kind of start knocking this thing down to a manageable level where once you get the right equipment in place and the right facilities put together, then you could take the common sense practices of everything. And we've talked about this a few times over the last couple of days. I mean, the reason people didn't get the flu this year, why? Behavior. So you've got technical improvements and you have behavioral science. And the behavioral science was we washed our hands. We wore a mask. We didn't sneeze on each other. We were respecting of other people's space. So you sit back and say, okay, we want to get people back into the workforce and back into the offices. First thing you have to do is kind of deprogram what's been programmed, right? Being close to people's bad. It's you create an environment where you understand what you do. So if you're an operations center, if you're a healthcare center, if you're a healthcare provider, if you're a restaurant, if you're a retail store, what's the mission, right? So the mission for the healthcare provider and everybody else is make it even a healthier environment, right? Anywhere there's gatherings of people coming in for treatment, make sure that area is as clean as it could possibly be, and use technology that gets you there. Space out the chairs, do things like that. Because you want people to feel comfortable. You want to have people feel comfortable. It's human nature. If you're in the retail business, you want to create the perfect environment for someone to come in and take off their jacket and hang out and buy stuff and walk around and not worry about, when COVID first hit, we had shopping hours and you go in there and everybody's going down the aisles in one way and you didn't want to get near anybody. And it's like, oh my God, I got to get the ketchup, but there's somebody by the ketchup. No ketchup this week. That's got to go away. So our thing was to look at technologies, and there's a lot of them out there, and what we want to do really is for folks is we found much like Megan, you go in, understand what they do, understand what their environment is, understand how people move through a building, where people gather in a building, and then how can we change that? Well, there's been air changes in buildings, which could cost a lot of money. There's devices like HEPA filters you could put in to catch items. There's bipolar ionization, which helps put things together to catch in a filter and helps deactivate, viruses and things that make you sick. So the main thing is you sit back and say, okay, we've got this incredible palette of technology, and we've got this great knowledge source like Megan puts together. So how do we marry these two together and say, okay, here's your environment, here's a technology that matches your environment, as well as some behavioral sciences changes. If you do that, I think you're going to be good, because you know what? You want your operations folks to feel comfortable in their operations center. That's productivity. You want your patients to feel comfortable in your healthcare facilities, because that's customer service. That's high ratings. That's how you get, that's how people feel good about themselves. So, and you want your employees in these facilities also to feel very safe with technology and proper spacing too, because that's employee morale. That's showing that you care. Mm-hmm. If you're doing things to create a better environment for the people that have to be there, to me, that's the obligation of a good employer as well. Is to say, okay, we have an issue. Let's corral it. Let's understand it. Let's do something to fix it, because our most valuable asset is our people. Mm-hmm. And if our people aren't collaborating, if they're not coming together, because the collaboration, I think COVID took away collaboration. And that could be devastating. I mean, I'm 57. I've done my collaborating days, right? But I mean, if I go back 30 years of my career, that's the most important, the developmental stages of my career, when I'm learning and I'm understanding, and it's the nuances of what you do by what you learn from people around you to make you better for what you do and better for your clients. It's not just the textbook stuff. And you can't learn that sitting in a home over a Zoom call, right? So I think it's a matter of understanding everything Megan went over about what your needs are. I think it's understanding your building from a technical perspective. I think it's installing proper equipment and behavioral sciences to make people work. And then I think it's repeating that from a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis to make sure, is my air quality in my building still good? Am I still performing when I'm supposed to performing? Don't get short-term memory. Maintain good policies, principles, and good behaviors. Because COVID was the canary in the coal mine. It just woke us up.
I think that's a great point about staying on top of things and sort of constantly monitoring, because one thing that occurs to me is our understanding of COVID-19 evolved over the period of the pandemic. And in the early days, there was a lot of concern about surface-to-surface transmission, and a little bit less concern about airborne transmission. And a whole set of policies and practices went into place over surface to surface, and then those evolved over time. I guess a question for both of you, and I'll begin with you, John, is at this moment in time, as more people are vaccinated, more people are going out and about, and more people are returning to their work environments, what are some best practices that you are seeing and that you're suggesting to employers to engage in as their employees come back into their work environments?
Well, I'm kind of, the technical approach from our perspective is, from what we did in our research, for what we found from a cost basis that made sense, from a documentable effectiveness point of view, we found a needlepoint bipolar ionization to be a very simple yet effective deterrent to airborne issues. It's not something that you need to really question, because what you're doing is, what we found by looking at a lot of different technologies, we found a needlepoint bipolar ionization, basically, I call it like a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. We're not waiting for something to come in. Well, we're not. What it basically is bipolar ionization is putting ions into the air through a device that basically does a couple things. One, the reason I have this background is this background is 10,000 feet in the mountains in Vail from the Game Creek Resort. Massive ions, clean air, breathable. The easiest way to understand bipolar ionization is we're bringing this outdoor air into your building. And we're creating this outdoor air environment in your building that also creates a couple different things. One, the ions deactivate stuff that's not good. SARS, COVID, et cetera, we could help mitigate the effectiveness of those pathogens and those viruses. The other thing it does with some other things such as dusts and molds, et cetera, is it causes agglomulation, which makes things come together because of polarities. And it makes things basically, when they hit your filter in your system, they stop. Versus like taking a handful of BBs and throwing them through a chain link fence. You're throwing a bowling ball at a chain link fence and it's going to stop it, right? And then the other things that come together in your environment basically fall to the ground in the form of dust. So again, is it the technology to save us? No, there's a lot of technologies there, but it's another layer of a very practical technology that you put in place that says, okay, if we're going to affect airborne things, let's put things in the air, such as ions, that affect airborne items, makes those airborne items more friendly to the environment, gets rid of them, and we could breathe easier. So if you go back a slide, John, what we basically do for clients is it's much like what Megan just talked about. We look at, understanding your systems, understanding how your building's being used, and these are just good principles for everybody to use. Measuring your existing air quality. There's ion meters, there's VOC meters, et cetera. What's my building even doing right now, right? And then get a report on it. Here's what your building's doing. So number one is understand your environment. Number two, specify a solution. Based upon the systems you have in place and everything else, you could look at how you could implement different technologies to help purify and clean the air sanitization, right? Next slide. Then you can basically sit back, and once you understand this, you can work with someone that can install some equipment. And then the main thing is I go back to this all the time and say, listen, we've put everything in, but let's maintain it and check it, because I think on a go forward basis, people just want to know the wellness seal. It's okay to come in my building, right? Mm-hmm. And let's face it, from a competitive analysis, I mean, if you're out there trying to get customers, and like I say, belly buttons through the door all the time, right? That's what everybody wants to do to get business. Make the choice easier for your customers. Here's a building with nothing saying that they're saying they're doing nothing, and here's a vendor that does the same thing next door with a little thing on their door that says, "Hey, we're doing this for our air," right? Am I saying it's going to drive more business in your door? No, but it just shows that you're taking these proper layered steps to make the environment more friendly, right? And then again, continuously check it. Just the biggest frustration for a consultant sometimes is you put together a great plan, right, Megan? You implement the great plan, then you walk away and nobody does anything anymore. The plan sits there and it collects dust on the shelf. We've done all this great stuff for nothing. So I think getting people back to work is a matter of saying, I'm willing to invest some time and effort and technology into your environment. I'm willing to check that environment on a regular basis. That's a good slide, Jonathan. You could keep that up. And I'm willing to continuously check that environment to make sure that when you leave on Friday, it's the same environment you're coming into on Monday. And again, this is my selection on equipment. This may not be everybody's selection on equipment. This is from my research. This is my opinion of what I like. So the thing is, I'm telling everybody is, do your homework, study, look at the market, see what's out there. There's some great stuff out there. And then take that step. To me, it's, it's like anything else you would do. It's like putting a security system on your building, right? That there's a reason that you're doing it. This is like just putting another layer of protection in your air for your customers, your employees, and yourself. I mean, let's face it, you got to go to work too, right? So that's my approach. And I mean, that combined with good behavioral science, and I think we're going to get there. But I mean, you also want to it's showing people you care, right?
Sure.
That's about as technical as I'm going to get.
well, before we pivot to the audience for some questions, Megan, I kind of want to throw the same question to you. You're talking to a lot of building owners in the market, a lot of office tenants. What sorts of early best practices are you seeing, and what sorts of best practices are you recommending to employers as
Yeah.
they welcome employees back into the office?
You know, I think, well, I think it's not no one will be surprised by this, and we all agree with this. This has put health and safety at the forefront. And it's really, we were finishing up a project with a big healthcare provider in the area. And as we finished it in their administrative spaces, that we're wrapping up the consultancy piece of it. And this came forward. I said, we have such an opportunity to really blend the brilliant minds about what has worked in healthcare with what could be really prominent in corporate spaces. All of those antimicrobial materials and those health and safety practices that we have, they're now like coming crashing together. And so those things, some of those things, the health and safety protocols that I think are going to be with us for a long time, the cleaning protocols, the availability of more prominent sanitization materials and those kinds of things, about making people feel, kind of to John's point, comfortable about coming back. The physical distancing is still in practice, and we got really good at making 6-foot bubbles on a floor plan and putting them all over the plan to make people feel very comfortable about having that distance. I think we're going to walk back from that, to be quite frank. I mean, I think as the governor starts to acknowledge that when we get to a certain case level where he's going to lift the restrictions, as people get more vaccinated, we're going to see a lifting of that. But I think we are always going to have some degree of flexibility in there. If someone is not feeling well, it's now going to be more socially acceptable, as it always should have been, but it wasn't, because we come into work sick because we're, like Americans, and we work through flu and everything. But we're going to have more sensitivity to that. So do I think that I think the physical distancing is going to kind of come off a little bit. I think we're still going to have a lot of leeway between, being more sensitive about people that maybe don't want to be as densified. We're not going to be planning really, really dense plans, I don't think, for quite a while. We're just going to have a greater appreciation for the impact of health and well-being from our physical spaces and what they're able to offer, but also a respect for that for our employees. I mean, I think we've appreciated not only their physical health, but also their mental and emotional well-being as part of this too, because the reaction to COVID has been all over the place. I mean, we have some that are very confident to come back, some that are very, very concerned to come back, and we can't over or underestimate people's kind of reaction to this. So I kind of appreciate that we've kind of gone a bit more gentler and a bit more kind of empathetic about our environments and how people can react in them.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure employees will be very, very grateful to see that extra attention to health and safety as they return for the long term.
Yeah.
As has been noted, we had a healthier season in a lot of ways as a result of some of these safety measures, and a lot of those things will probably be with us to stay. I'd like to pause here and turn it over to Jonathan to see what questions we may have coming in from the audience.
Sure. So we have a question from Sue McConnell.
That's a very technical question. I saw that one.
Thank you, Sue, for your question. She's looking at PHI units for her building. Is that different from the needlepoint bipolar ionization? And that's for John.
I'm getting my notes.
Good answer.
Well, here's the thing, the PHIs, and I'll be very frank with you. When I looked at the technologies that were out there, I kind of stopped on needlepoint. And here's why. When I saw needlepoint bipolar ionization, I saw, okay, I'm like, where's the negative externalities to this, and where are the positive externalities to this? And where can I understand this, right? I have to understand. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a technical guy. I'm a finance guy for the most part. So I looked at this and said, okay, I can understand it. I don't see any negatives in it. I see nothing but positives in it. What we could do is we could get you an answer. I think Brian was going to be able, he would have been able to answer that better if he was here. We could get you an answer on that. You know, like I said, my source, my choice of technology was bipolar ionization because it's safe, it's effective, and it's relatively inexpensive to put in. The other items that are out there, such as UVC lighting, I understand those. I know the expenses to them. I know you have to basically replace the lamps, and they use a lot of power and a lot of energy. Negative air machines, I know where those are at. Some of the other things that are out there, I think what you're talking about may have something to do with some hydrogen peroxide type effect in the air and stuff. that's not my particular expertise on that, but we could get you an answer to it.
Okay,
Well, if
and
you can get us that answer, we'll be happy to share it with our audience.
Sure.
okay, and this next question is probably for Megan. Does flexibility at work create better work environments, or does it depend on the industry? And I know we kind of noted that, you know, designers have to be in office. So,
Yeah.
you know, does it depend on the industry, or does it just overall create a better environment?
You know, it's interesting. I think we've gone to a phase of, you know, just such authenticity for an organization, really that exploration of what does it mean for me? And I think when you were to ask so many organizations about what's the essence of their culture, what makes them unique, I know that when I ask that at the start of a project, everyone says it's our people. And so you have to really look at what is the essence of how do you have an authentic reflection of your culture? Many times it's through your physical space. It's a place where we come together. We want to have presence. We want to be able to learn from one another. So I think certainly those industries, and we've seen them, maybe it's law or finance or accounting or some other types of professional services, where the nature of their work is just much more independent. And you can kind of understand from some of those professions, they're very focused work. Their work is very concentrated. And they're doing that more than they are collaborating and interacting. And maybe they're doing that in some level of teamwork. So we've seen that sort of shift of, maybe those are the professions that may not have kind of a radical transformation of coming back to the workplace in really great numbers. They still seem to need a place to have that connection to culture and a place to have that identity. I don't think we have a lot of organizations that now want to become internet companies. It's that you're losing that personal connection. The creative agencies, some professional services, others, manufacturing and things like that have had that need for in-person interaction. Creativity happens that way. Collaboration and connection happens that way. And so it is a very distinctive reaction based on your profession and your unique needs and what you have. For example, we have very young workforce. We've been hiring, I would say about a third of our organization is new to the last 2 years. That's a really critical time. And so if you have a very tenured staff, your reaction might be a little bit different, but we have a young workforce that is, in our profession, we thrive off of that learning and mentorship and development. And you can't Google, your way out of an architectural drawing. It's just not going to happen. So we really need the physical space to reinforce that. So just some things to think about as you're tailoring what your work environment needs to be, for your own cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. And I definitely think that, being social with your coworkers helps you work better and collaborate better. So
absolutely,
I've appreciated since we've had a flexible schedule at work.
It deepens engagement as well, and I think when you have that engaged workforce there's a lot of trust in your relationship, that you've got that connection to one another. They're not as likely, when you appreciate them and they know the value that they bring to your organization, they're less likely to just leave for the next organization that's going to pay them whatever extra to have them come and work for them. And if we are only working through a virtual platform, we just feel that there's a greater propensity for some of that to happen. And we believe in people, so that happens in the physical space. But
definitely. And I think this next question can be for anyone, but how can workplaces prevent their employees from becoming lax with mask wearing and distancing around the office? Is it over communication? Is it signage around the office, or is it incentives, or all of the above?
Well, that to me is a part of what we talked about earlier. It's like the employer-employee relationship, correct? If me as the employer, if I'm willing to make an investment in your environment, I'm going to ask you to return that by respecting the rules and respecting some policies that we're going to put. I hate rules, policies. We're going to put policies in place to respect our neighbor and respect our coworker. So if the organization is willing to invest in the technology to improve the environment, we're going to ask you to follow procedures to help enhance that. Because again, It's that learning experience that we could only put layers of protection in place, but you have to help us too. And you have to respect your coworker's space. And if your coworker feels more comfortable with you wearing a mask or that person wearing a mask, and we don't know where this mask wearing is going to go. This is going to be dictated by people at much higher levels than me and us. It just needs to be. I think it's all about respect, and that starts with an example. And the example is, and it doesn't even have to be the employer. It could be the employee, those who work there. It could be the team members putting together policies and principles to share with each other through collaboration, which we've already missed, and put that together to say, listen, these are just the things we have to do to protect ourselves, to protect our customers, to protect our clients that come in and see us. I can't wait to go back to take my dog to the veterinarian when I can go in with my dog to the vet. I mean, that's how far this has come, right? It's like you're communicating in a parking lot on your phone when your pet's in the veterinarian's office. I mean, it's almost ridiculous anymore, but we've got to get back to that. And I think that's, again, it's all mutual respect.
I've been
technology. I'm sorry.
Oh no, sorry, she's wrapping up. I've been a part of our return to office. And so I've been fortunate and really fortunate to be able to help our organization kind of take what we learned from others and bring it into the work environment. Very much to your point, how do we get this to stick? And we have found that multiple levels of communication in multiple ways. So for example, we're going to talk about how we're making our way back. It's going to be at an initial level, it's going to be to an all staff. And then you can kind of take that into your departments and reinforcing what the organization's goals are through leadership, through a top down. But then we're also giving our people a little runway. We're not explicitly saying we want you to get vaccinated, but we're letting them go do that. We have a very flexible approach to work. We just want to, let them do those kinds of things. And so and looking at it from John's point too, then you've got the work environment that is meeting up with those needs. So we're trying on multiple fronts to make it a very positive and comfortable experience so that we have multiple defenses if someone's not wearing a mask. Well, maybe 80% of our workforce is vaccinated and we have got physical distancing and the cleaning products. So we're trying to hit this from a bunch of different angles and then have people feel that they're part of that solution too. We do have a lot of signage. We do kind of have friendly reminders at the hand washing stations and in our cafe spaces. At the doors, we have, go up this exit and down this, stairwell kind of thing, just to reinforce that. So we're trying to be very broad in how we communicate that, and hopefully everyone, continues to get that message.
So
if I could jump in and just share from a small business employer perspective at Downtown Cleveland Alliance, and I recognize for us, in some ways, it may have been easier as a smaller business. We've had, as I mentioned at the outset, our team in the office every other day for most of the last year, and I think one of the things we've done really well as a team is observe the mask wearing and physical distancing rules within the office, and I think it goes back to something, John, that both you and Megan touched on, which is culture and respect for your fellow workers, your colleagues, and I also think one of the things that was important was the practices being modeled by the leaders within the office, and it's just kind of that positive peer pressure from above, but also around, and it worked really well for us. I know in larger work environments, it may be more challenging for folks to have adhered to the mask policies, but that's something that we had a very good experience with.
And so, thinking about returning to the office, is there a key factor in the process of returning employees back to the office? Is it people in the respective companies being vaccinated? Is it the availability of vaccinations? Is it beefing up sanitization and cleaning around the office that's really determining when people would be coming back to the office? Can you give us a sense of what are the key factors in bringing folks back?
Well, I can say we wanted to have people be prepared. And we knew, we track a lot of organizations when they're coming back. What's the general sentiment of this? We're paying attention to what's happening in Ohio and New York and all of our other, we have some key talent in other states. So we're looking at all of these different things. One, we wanted to be really prepared for our teams. We also wanted to give them a runway to kind of return. So we know that summer is summer. People take vacations. Thankfully, they're going to start taking vacations again. Kids are off of school. So for us to come back and say, hey, the vaccine is has accelerated so quickly, let's come back kind of in our future way of thinking in June. And that was just too soon for a lot of that felt too rushed, and it felt like we're going to have things just kind of go haywire. So we are one is preparation. And I think it's a lot of those factors that contributed to that. The availability of the vaccine, our cleaning protocols have been pretty much the same as they've been this time last year when we came back the first time. They have not fallen off, even if we've had not a lot of people in the office, but we have been having people in. So all of those things, as we talk to our people this week, it's like, this is what's happening on all these different fronts to hopefully make this a helpful return for you so that you're comfortable. We're also giving employees a little bit of runway over the summer to sort of acclimate to this, because we still have lots of, we don't have everybody vaccinated yet. I mean, obviously in Ohio, we're I think 37% or 35% or something like that are fully vaccinated. So we know that just by the numbers of it, we're not really there yet. I do think that the Labor Day number, whether it's on either coast, is that's the mindset of people is that's when, we may be back to a bit more normal situation, but we gotta get there. We can't just do it overnight.
Well, and it's like the question earlier about technologies. What do we do with technologies? Well, I make sure I employ very strong technical minds. And what our job is to get people back comfortably is to go in again. It starts off with a plan. And our job is to go in and ask the right questions, ask about people movement, current building movement, current building operations, understand the use of the building, understand our client, understand their business, understand what they do. And then you sit back and say, okay, here's the rules and regulations. Here's the flow of people. Here's the flow of commerce through this particular retail site, restaurant, whatever. And then you sit back and say, okay, with the environment they're working in, let's match them up with the best technology to enhance that process. So I think it's an overarching development. And I think, quite candidly, I think indoor air quality from a technical treatment perspective has changed forever. I think it's forever changed. I think making sure that air sanitization is part of everybody's process and procedures going forward is going to be in the plan, because it's my belief, my opinion, that COVID-19 was a wake-up call. And if it's not COVID-19, it's not SARS, it's going to be something else eventually, right? And we don't know what the variances are going to do. I don't want to talk about vaccines, because the vaccine's good for this year. I get the flu shot every year. I don't know if the flu shot's going to work next year, right? So it's not even a matter of that. It's a matter of saying, okay, let's fix the environment with the technology that we have. Let's apply the good behavioral science that we have, because no matter what we do from a medical standpoint, vaccines change every year from year to year, because things evolve, things change. The one thing that we could say we could put into a steady state is policy, procedure, respect for each other's space, indoor air quality cleaning. We can control those controllables. Those are the controllables that we have power over. Variants and airbornes, we have no control over. This is going to happen. We have to reactively go after those as we see them happen. We have to proactively kind of predict what could possibly happen. Those are minds much finer than mine. Those are medical minds that I can't touch. But what I do know is I can create a safer environment by putting in layers of protection, both behavioral science and technology. And that way I could tell my employees, listen, I sincerely have done all I can do to make this the best environment I can give you. I wish I had a magic wand. It's safe to come here. I don't. Nobody does. But what I do have is technology and smart people that think of smart things. So if we follow our behavioral science, if we utilize our technology, we've done the best we can to make this the best environment for you to thrive in, collaborate in, and excel in. That's, to me, that's what it's all about.
Well, an hour flies by. Before I ask a concluding question, I want to ask one follow-up technical question. John, our questioner earlier about PHI asked a follow-up question whether she should reach out directly to Brian, since you indicated.
Or reach out to me. I'll chase it down.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you have it, Sue. Reach out to John, and he'll chase down an answer to your question.
I mean, I kind of know the answer, but I don't have I'm not 100%, but I'm going to give you the person that can answer it to the T.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, the concluding question I'd like to ask is one that I began asking when we started this webinar series last year. At a time when it was very, very difficult to look into the crystal ball. And Megan, I may have asked you this question last year.
I think you might have. I remember.
It was difficult to look into the crystal ball.
Right.
It was murky, but hope was a challenging thing to come by. Long-term vision was a hard thing to come by. So I would encourage our guests to help us think what things would look like a year from now. And so I'm going to ask you to look into that crystal ball, which I hope is a little bit clearer with where we are with the pandemic. Megan, what do you think the future of work will look like a year from now?
I think we're going to be in the middle of a hybrid experiment. I think we're going to have people in the office. I think we're going to have people at home. I think we're going to have teams in two places. I think we're going to be seeing, but I'm not saying that from a scary perspective. I'm really optimistic because I think when we put our minds to something, we can figure something out in great ways. And I'm really I'm trusting that teams are going to navigate how they have people in different environments and how this works for them and for their business. I think we're going to have a greater cohesion and allegiance of teams being kind of emboldened to support each other, whether they are in whatever location that they're in. So I think we're going to be back. I think our mask mandates are going to be lifted. I think our physical distancing requirements are going to be lifted. But I think we're going to be in the middle of an experiment of how this works. And we're going to go through a couple cycles of, swinging the pendulum back and forth of maybe that didn't work for us. So we're going to try something different. But I think we're going to be largely back, but doing a lot of testing and iteration of what's going to work for the long term.
John, I'll give you the last word on the same question. Let's look into the crystal ball 12 months from now. What does the future of work look like?
Well, I agree with everything Megan said. And I think part of the experiment, though, is also financial and economic.
Yeah.
I think large leaseholders are now looking at the space in which they really need to house people. I think it's a matter of saying, okay, what is the home workforce look like? What does my remote workforce look like? How much square footage do I really need to house people for collaborative purposes, for manufacturing purposes? And I think part of this experiment is really saying, okay, how can I not only reduce my footprint from a real estate standpoint, but how also am I going to reduce my carbon footprint by by really reducing the commute? I mean, a 15-mile commute versus a 15-step commute. The 15-step commute is much more green than a 15-mile commute, right? I think that's a big part of it.
Well, I think that's a great place to conclude the conversation. It's going to be an interesting 12 months, but I think a lot more positive and a lot more exciting than the last year has been. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, a lot to build on. Megan, John, I want to thank you for your time today. We really appreciate you joining us. Jonathan, I want to thank you for your work in putting together the webinar. Can't do it without you. The entire staff at Downtown Cleveland Alliance, and want to thank all of you in the audience for joining us once again for another episode of the Downtown Now webinar series. We will be back again with another episode in 2 weeks. We hope you'll be able to join us. And in the meantime, we hope to see you wandering the streets of downtown Cleveland. Take care, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.